Heather, welcome back to Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing what the committee does tonight.
Yeah, and now listen, you know how we always have these images of our head, being the college playoff expert that you are, I know this is not true, but I always have this image of you there and just your ear up against the door, listening for every little clue that you could possibly get. Am I even close, or am I so far away from that image that it's not true?
No, well, for the first and the last rankings, you're pretty close. I'm going to head down to Grapevine, Texas, at the Gaylord Texan Thursday of this week. So I go there for the first and last rankings, but all of my other reporting for the other lists are done from Bristol, Connecticut, or the home office. So
Gotcha,
it's close.
Gotcha. Well, Heather, obviously there's some anxiety here in Tuscaloosa after losing to the Auburn Tigers. What would you like to see from an Alabama perspective? Kind of look at it from that. What do Alabama fans need to see tonight in this rankings, and what do you think they will see?
Well, I think obviously Alabama's going to drop out of the top four. That should be expected. Are they at 5 or are they 6? It doesn't really matter. What matters right now is they need help. And the best thing in my mind that can happen for Alabama to get back in this thing would be for TCU to win the Big 12, to beat Oklahoma. I think it would be fairly easy for the selection committee to justify putting an 11-1 Alabama in ahead of a 2-loss TCU because of their resumes and because of where they rank now. So tonight when the rankings come out, I'm very curious to see where TCU is, because for the past 2 weeks, they've been number 12. The selection committee doesn't even think they're a top 10 team right now, and that's important for Alabama, because if TCU does win the Big 12, then that would be a significant, unprecedented leap for the Horned Frogs to go in because of that conference championship game. So I think that's one thing to watch tonight, and Alabama's best-case scenario.
If just the way that you know the committee, I mean, you've studied this committee ever since they were talking playoffs, even prior to sort of creating it. If you were guessing, how do you think their top four will look?
Tonight, I think they go with Clemson, number 1. I'm sure they had a good debate between Clemson and Oklahoma for that top spot. But when you look at Clemson's resume, they've got 7 wins against teams with winning records. That's important. 5 of those 7 wins have come against opponents that have at least 8 wins. And when you look at Clemson's resume, they might have a win against the eventual SEC champ in Auburn. They were able to do something Alabama couldn't. So Clemson gets the number 1 spot, I think, tonight, followed by Oklahoma. And then, look, flip a coin with either undefeated Wisconsin or 2-loss Auburn. I think both of those teams are in the top 4 tonight.
Well, when you look at the Alabama-Ohio State debate, let's say that Ohio State's able to win that. We'll go with the experts in the desert in Las Vegas and say that Ohio State's able to beat Wisconsin. How do you see the Ohio State-Alabama debate shaking out?
Well, this is what the selection committee would do, okay? They would look at Ohio State's resume and see that Ohio State just beat the only undefeated Power 5 team remaining in the country in Wisconsin. That's a top 4 win and a heck of a way to punctuate your playoff resume. And don't forget that they have a top 10 win against Penn State and a top 20 win probably against Michigan State. Now, are those 3 good wins enough to compensate for the god-awful loss to Iowa, in which they gave up 55 points? The committee would certainly have to weigh that. And, of course, they also lost at home to Oklahoma in week 2. Now, you compare that with Alabama's resume, and the one thing you know is they have the edge in the conference championship. They have the edge in strength of schedule. Alabama has the edge in consistency in the eye test. Alabama is the only team in the FBS right now that's ranked in the top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. The committee's going to love that. Alabama's been number 1, number 2 for the first 4 rankings, and that's a big reason why. But then the committee takes a deeper dive, and they say, okay, who were they consistent against? The likes of Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Tennessee. Their best wins have come against a 4-loss A&M team, a 3-loss LSU, and a 4-loss Mississippi State, which is almost sure to sink in the rankings tonight. So when you look at where the consistency has come from, that's going to be something else the committee's going to have to weigh in comparison with Ohio State's wins.
When you look at these coaches, do they play the scenario? Is there room for them to include this in their mind of who would we less like to play from a coaching perspective. It seems like that question would come up in some of these former coaches' minds.
Yeah, sure. There are 5 former coaches in that room, and what their job, all 13 of those people, their job is to get the 4 best teams, regardless of conference, division, conference championship, all of that. So that's a natural question to ask from a coach's perspective, and their voices certainly carry weight within the room. Now, are they any more valuable opinions than the other people in the room? No, but it's a different perspective. And every one of those committee members has coaches' cut-ups to look through. That's how they breeze through all these games. They're watching them on weekends, but they're also breezing through them on Sundays and on the plane ride to Dallas. So they're all taking that good close-up look at the offensive lines, the defensive lines, the quarterback play, etc. So they do bring that perspective to it. It's a fair question to ask. However way you want to get to it, they've got to get the 4 best teams.
What is the support to get past 4 teams and ultimately to 6 and 8 teams?
Well, I like to call them the suits of the sport, the FBS commissioners plus Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick, none of them are talking about it. None of them, nor is executive director Bill Hancock. The support is coming from a lot of the coaches, but Nick Saban, I've talked to him about it, and he has not wanted to expand it because look at how banged up Alabama is at linebacker. His argument is we want the 4 best teams. We don't want it to be a game of who's the healthiest team at the end of the day, who are the 4 best teams. And I think that's a valued argument. And look, right now, I think it's kind of difficult to pick 4 great teams. 4 good ones? Sure. But I think it would be even more difficult in a season like this to find 8 teams truly deserving of playing for a national title.
All right, so let me play the scenario, and this is the conspiracy that we've developed here in Tuscaloosa. You can certainly subscribe to it if you'd like. Let's say TCU beats Oklahoma. Let's say Ohio State edges out and beats Wisconsin, and they find a way to put 2 SEC teams in there. Will those athletic directors and those coaches go back to the table and go, well, maybe we need to look at 6 or 8 because if the SEC is going to get 2, we've got to push this agenda forward?
That's an interesting take on it and a very good question, a different way of looking at it. I don't necessarily think so. I'll tell you this. I think it's inevitable that the playoff is going to expand because it would bring more money in. Anytime there's more money, you go that direction, right? It makes sense. But this is a 12-year contract, and we're in the 4th year of it. And I would be really surprised if any serious conversations about expanding the playoff happened before the midway point around the 6th year. Because one thing that the people involved in the playoff don't want to do is what they did in the BCS system, which is knee-jerk reactions, make quick decisions. There is a true commitment on the part of the commissioners and the CFP executives to say, let's let this thing play out and see how it goes before we make any big-time decisions with it.
Heather Dinich, let me just put you on the spot. You think Alabama's part of this thing? I mean, basing everything that you see this weekend and the championship weekend, do you think the Crimson Tide next Sunday will get good news, or do you think they'll get bad news?
Oh, man. It honestly, look, it all goes down to the Big Ten and Big 12 championship. And there's a lot of debate between Alabama and Ohio State. I've been harping on it all week as well. But the bottom line is if TCU and Ohio State win, I see no reason why Ohio State and Alabama can't both get in this thing. Where it gets tricky is if Oklahoma wins. And look, you have to ask each one of those committee members individually about their vote between Alabama and Ohio State. I tend to lean toward the Buckeyes in spite of that bad loss to Iowa and the loss to Oklahoma, only because that win against Wisconsin alone would be better than anything on Alabama's resume. And they'd also have that conference championship should it come down to a tiebreaker of strength of schedule and conference championship. But I just can't predict what those people would do in that room when it comes down to that debate. But I would lean towards the Buckeyes. ESPN.com,
college football tab. You will find Heather Dinich, senior writer for ESPN, who covers the college football playoff process, how the Big Ten and the Big 12 title game will affect the playoff. Heather, thanks again for making a few minutes with us here in Tuscaloosa. We appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure. Hang in there.
All right. We're trying, but we're trying to look for answers, and the committee's not answering our telephone calls that we've been calling. So thanks, Heather.
All right. Take care.